The old rocking chair on the porch creaked a rhythmic, mournful tune, a soundtrack to my 60-plus years of life and the quiet, lonely evening. The sun, a tired orange orb, was sinking below the horizon, painting the sky in a palette of fiery reds and deep purples. A cool breeze, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, rustled the leaves on the ancient oak tree in my front yard. I watched it all from my chair, a glass of iced tea sweating in my hand, but my mind was miles away, replaying the last few days in an endless, agonizing loop. It was my daughter, Sarah, my bright-eyed, clever girl who had grown up to be a force of nature, a successful lawyer, a mother. She was the one who had dropped the bombshell, the one who had declared with a calm finality that chilled me to the bone that her golden boy, my grandson Liam, deserved the guest room. The other grandkids, my sweet, boisterous little darlings, would have to sleep on the floor. The words had hit me like a physical blow. I had to lean against the kitchen counter, the air knocked out of me. My hands had trembled as I stared at her, trying to find the little girl I knew inside the confident, unyielding woman standing before me. "Sarah," I had started, my voice hoarse. "What are you talking about? They're all my grandkids. They're all family." She had simply sighed, a puff of exasperation that stung more than any angry word. "Dad, don't be dramatic. Liam is visiting from college. He's a young man. He needs his space. He needs a proper bed. The others are just kids. They'll be fine on the sleeping bags." Just kids. The phrase echoed in my head, a bitter, hollow sound. Just kids were my grandchildren too. My grandson Leo, with his shy smile and his passion for building with Legos. My granddaughter Mia, a whirlwind of energy with pigtails and a contagious laugh. How could she so casually dismiss them, their comfort, their feelings? The irony of it all was that the guest room had always been a sacred space. My wife, Eleanor, bless her soul, had decorated it with such care. She had put up a quilt she'd hand-stitched, a labor of love for her future grandchildren. It was supposed to be a place of welcome, a sanctuary for everyone who came through our door. The idea of it being reserved for one, while the others were relegated to the floor, felt like a betrayal of her memory. My son, Mark, Sarah's older brother, was the one who had finally broken the stunned silence. "Sarah, that's not right," he had said, his voice low and strained. "You know that's not right. The house is big enough for everyone. We can make it work." Sarah had just shaken her head, her jaw set. "No, this is how it's going to be." And that was the end of the discussion, at least for her. The following days were a study in silent tension. The kids, with their uncanny ability to sense the unspoken, were quiet. Leo and Mia were huddled together in the living room, whispering. Liam, oblivious or perhaps just uncaring, was already ensconced in the guest room, his door closed, his presence a heavy, invisible wall between us all. I found myself watching them all, my heart aching with a mixture of love and frustration. I saw the way Leo's face fell when he saw the sleeping bags on the living room floor. I saw the confusion in Mia's eyes as she looked from her sleeping bag to the closed door of the guest room. And I saw the way Liam carried himself, a sense of entitlement in his every step, a reflection of the privilege he'd been given his entire life, a privilege I now realized I had a hand in creating. My mind drifted back to when Liam was a boy. He was a good kid, bright, quick to laugh, but he always had a certain confidence, a certainty that the world was his for the taking. We had all indulged him, I admit. His first steps, his first word, his first A on a test, they were all met with a shower of praise that, in hindsight, may have been a little over the top. Sarah had always called him her golden boy, a name that had started as a term of endearment, but had slowly, insidiously, become a title, a mark of his supposed superiority. The others, Leo and Mia, were just as wonderful, just as deserving. But they were quieter, their accomplishments less grand, their needs less vocal. They were happy to just be, to be with their family, to build their Lego castles and draw their crayon pictures. They never demanded the spotlight, and we in our blindness had never fully given it to them. Now, as I sat on my porch, I knew the mistake we had made. The crack in our family, the one that had just widened into a chasm, wasn't new. It had been forming for years, a slow, steady erosion of fairness and equality. Sarah's declaration hadn't created the problem, it had just brought it to the surface, a festering wound finally exposed to the harsh light of day. The sky was now a deep indigo, and a single timid star twinkled into existence. I took a long, slow sip of my tea, the coolness a small comfort against the heat of my anger and my sadness. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't let this stand. I couldn't let my family be divided like this. But what could I do? How could I, an old man in a rocking chair, mend a rift that had been growing for a lifetime? The path forward wasn't clear, but one thing was. I wouldn't be sitting here in this rocking chair, watching my family fall apart. I had to do something, anything, to show my grandchildren, all of them, that they were equally loved, equally valued, and that in this house there were no golden boys and no just kids. There was only family, and family, I was about to remind everyone, sticks together. The next morning the house was a minefield of unspoken tension. I woke up before anyone else, the old grandfather clock in the hall chiming 6 times, each bong echoing the emptiness I felt inside. The living room was a mess of sleeping bags, blankets, and pillows, a stark and painful visual of the previous night's injustice. My grandkids, Leo and Mia, were still fast asleep, their small bodies curled up together, their innocence a stark contrast to the ugliness of the situation. I knelt down and gently tucked the blankets around them, a silent apology for a world they shouldn't have to understand. I made coffee, the rich, bitter aroma a small comfort in the quiet kitchen. I heard footsteps on the stairs, and my son, Mark, walked in. His face was a roadmap of exhaustion and worry. He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes lingering on the disarray in the living room. "Dad?" he said, his voice a low rumble. "I'm sorry about all this. It's not right." "I know, son," I said, pouring him a mug of coffee. "I know." He took a slow sip, his gaze fixed on the steam rising from the mug. "I tried talking to her again last night," he confessed. "She just doesn't see it. She says Liam needs to be comfortable, that it's what's best for him. She keeps saying he's a grown man now and the others are just kids." "It's more than that, Mark," I said, a deep ache in my chest. "It's about how she sees them. It's about how we've always seen them. We've always put Liam on a pedestal, haven't we? We've called him our golden boy, we've praised his every achievement, and we've, without meaning to, made the others feel less important." Mark looked at me, a flash of recognition in his eyes. "You think so?" "I know so," I said, my voice firm. "Look at it. Liam's in a private room with a comfortable bed and Leo and Mia are on the floor. What message does that send? It tells them that their comfort, their needs, are secondary. It tells them that they are, in fact, just kids." We fell into a heavy silence, the truth of my words hanging in the air between us. It was a hard truth to swallow, a confession of our own unintentional complicity. We had loved them all, but our actions had shown a clear favoritism that had now come to define the family dynamic. A few minutes later, Sarah came down the stairs. She was dressed in a pristine white t-shirt and jeans, a contrast to the emotional turmoil she had caused. She gave us a tight, polite smile. "Morning, Dad. Mark, coffee smells good." "Morning, Sarah," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Did you sleep well?" She nodded. "Fine, thanks. Liam is still asleep, of course." "College kids," she added with a small, knowing chuckle. That chuckle, so full of pride, felt like a slap in the face. I wanted to scream, to ask her how she could be so blind, so oblivious to the pain she was causing. But I held my tongue. Screaming wouldn't solve anything. It would just create more distance, more animosity. I had to approach this with a strategy, not just raw emotion. I waited for a beat, then said, "Sarah, I've been thinking. I'm going to set up the guest room for all the grandkids." Her smile vanished instantly. "Dad, we talked about this. Liam needs his space. And so do Leo and Mia," I countered, my voice steady. "They're a bit older now. They're not little babies anymore. They can share the room with Liam. It'll be a chance for them to bond." It was a lie, of course. The room wasn't big enough for all three, but I needed a starting point, a way to chip away at her defenses. "That's ridiculous," she said, her voice rising. "They'll be in each other's way. Liam won't be able to study." "He's on vacation, Sarah," Mark interjected, his own patience wearing thin. "He can study in the den or at the kitchen table. He doesn't need a private sanctuary." The argument was heating up again, the same old ground being fought over with renewed ferocity. I stepped between them. "Stop," I said, my voice cutting through the tension. "This is my house, and I will not have my grandchildren sleeping on the floor while another one is in a proper bed." I looked at Sarah, my gaze unwavering. "This isn't just about a room. It's about respect. It's about fairness. And it's about making sure that every one of my grandchildren knows that they are valued equally. If you can't accept that, then you and Liam can find somewhere else to stay." The words hung in the air, a final, unyielding statement. Sarah's face went from angry to shock to a deep, burning resentment. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She just stared at me, then at Mark, then back at me. Finally, she turned and walked away, her footsteps heavy and deliberate as she went back upstairs. I knew I had gone too far. I knew I had pushed her to a breaking point, but a part of me, the part that remembered my wife's dream of a united family, a house full of love and laughter, knew that it had to be said. The peace we had before was a lie, a thin veneer over a festering problem. I had just ripped the bandage off, and now the healing, painful as it would be, could finally begin. I sat back down at the kitchen table, the silence in the house heavy and suffocating. Mark put a hand on my shoulder, a gesture of support that meant everything. "What now, Dad?" he asked, his voice low. "Now," I said, taking a deep breath and letting it out slowly. "We wait, and we show them. We show them with our actions, not just our words, that every single one of them is our golden child." The tension in the house was a physical presence, a thick fog that made every movement and every word feel heavy. Sarah and Liam, for their part, stayed in the guest room, the door a closed barrier between them and the rest of the family. The quiet was punctuated only by the low hum of the air conditioner and the occasional hushed whispers of Leo and Mia, who seemed to sense that something was deeply wrong. I spent the day with the two of them, trying my best to act as if everything was normal. We built a massive Lego city in the den, a sprawling metropolis of colorful plastic bricks. Leo, with his quiet focus and meticulous planning, was the architect, and Mia, with her boundless creativity, added whimsical touches. A purple brick dragon here, a tiny park with a swing set there. They laughed and chattered, their pure joy a welcome balm to my wounded heart. In the middle of building our city, Mia looked up at me, her big brown eyes filled with a question. "Grandpa," she said, her voice a small, hesitant whisper, "is Liam mad at us?" The question caught me off guard. I set down the brick I was holding and took her small hand in mine. "No, sweetie," I said, my voice as gentle as I could make it. "Liam isn't mad at you, and he isn't mad at Leo. He's just being a teenager." It was a feeble excuse, but what else could I say? How could I explain to a 6-year-old that her cousin was being selfish, that her mother was being unjust, and that her grandfather was in the middle of a family feud? Leo, ever the observer, chimed in. "He doesn't like sleeping with us, does he?" The question was a direct hit. I squeezed their hands, a silent promise. "Listen to me, both of you," I said, looking from one to the other. "You are both so important to me. You are just as important as anyone else in this house. You'll always have a place here. Always." They seemed to accept my words, a small measure of comfort, and returned to their Lego world. But the questions lingered, a reminder of the damage that had been done. That evening, as the sun began to set, I decided to take a different approach. I went to the guest room and knocked on the door. After a long moment of silence, Liam opened it, his expression a mixture of annoyance and surprise. He was tall, like his father, and had the same dark hair and piercing blue eyes. But where his father's eyes were filled with warmth, Liam's held a cold detachment. "Hey, Grandpa," he said, his voice flat. "Liam, can I come in?" I asked. He hesitated, then stepped back, allowing me to enter. The room was neat, the bed immaculately made. It was as if he was a visitor in a hotel, not a grandchild in his grandfather's home. I sat on the edge of the bed, the embroidered quilt feeling cool beneath my hand. "Liam," I began, choosing my words carefully, "I need to talk to you. Not about the room, not about your mother. About you. About us." He crossed his arms over his chest, a clear signal of his unwillingness to engage. "What about us?" "I've been thinking about how we've treated you," I said, looking at him, a sense of deep sadness washing over me. "And I think we've made a mistake. We've called you our golden boy, we've praised you endlessly, and we've, without meaning to, put a lot of pressure on you. We've made you feel like you have to be the best, that you're somehow more important than everyone else." He scoffed. "Is this a lecture? Because I'm not in the mood." "It's not a lecture, son. It's an apology," I said, my voice cracking slightly. I'm sorry that we taught you that you deserved special treatment. I'm sorry that we led you to believe that you were more important than your cousins." For a moment, The cold detachment in his eyes wavered, replaced by a flicker of something I couldn't quite decipher, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a sullen mask. "I don't know what you're talking about, Grandpa. I just wanted a place to sleep." "A place you have," I said, my voice hardening slightly. "A place you were given at the expense of others. And that, Liam, is not what this family is about. It's not what your grandmother would have wanted. This house, this room, it was built on love, on the idea that everyone has a place at the table, a place to rest their head, not just the chosen few." He just stared at me, his face unreadable. I knew I hadn't gotten through to him, but at least I had said my piece. I had laid the truth bare, not just for him to hear, but for me to say. I had to acknowledge my own role in creating this mess. I stood up and walked to the door. "Think about it, Liam," I said, my hand on the doorknob. "We're all here. We're a family. We're all we have. And we're a lot stronger when we're together." I closed the door behind me, the click of the latch echoing in the quiet hallway. I walked down the stairs, the weight of the day settling on my shoulders. I didn't know if my words would have any effect, but I had to try. The foundation of our family was cracking, and it was up to me, the old man, to try and hold the pieces together. That night, I saw Mark and Sarah arguing in hushed tones in the kitchen. Their voices were low, but the tension was palpable. Mark's face was a mask of frustration, and Sarah's was a study in defiance. I knew the fight was about me, about my ultimatum. I knew I had put a strain on their relationship too, and that knowledge was a heavy burden. But I couldn't back down. I couldn't let my grandchildren believe that some were more worthy than others. The guest room was a symbol, and I had to fight to change what it represented. I went back to the porch to my rocking chair, the creak of the wood a familiar comfort. The night air was cool and crisp, the stars a brilliant, uncaring backdrop to our human drama. I looked up at the moon, a pale sliver in the dark sky, and I thought of Eleanor. I imagined her shaking her head, a gentle, sad smile on her face. "Oh, Arthur," she'd say, "you've got a mess on your hands." And I knew she was right. But I also knew she'd want me to fight for it, to fight for the family she had loved so much. And that's exactly what I was going to do. The following day brought a slight, almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere. The tension was still there, but it was no longer a solid wall. It was more like a thin veil, something you could almost see through. Sarah and Liam still kept to themselves, but their door was open a crack, a silent, tentative peace offering. I decided to seize the opportunity. I went into the den where Leo and Mia were building a new addition to their Lego city. "Hey guys," I said, sitting on the floor with them. "How about we do something fun today? Something different? How about we go fishing?" Their faces lit up instantly. Fishing was one of their favorite things to do. We had a small boat on a nearby lake, a place I had gone with my own father, and later with Mark and Sarah. "Can Liam come?" Mia asked, her voice innocent. The question hung in the air, a test of my newfound resolve. I looked at the closed door of the guest room. I could tell them no, that it was just for the three of us. But that would defeat the purpose. It would only reinforce the divisions. "Sure," I said, my voice a little louder than I intended. "I'll go ask him." I walked to the guest room and knocked gently. Liam opened the door, his eyes a little guarded, but he didn't close it. "We're going fishing," I said, my tone casual. "Want to come?" He looked at me, then at the living room where Leo and Mia were huddled together, their heads bent over their Legos. He seemed to be weighing the offer, a flicker of uncertainty on his face. "I don't know," he said, his voice low. It's kind of hot out." "It's a beautiful day," I said, my voice firm but not aggressive. "The fish are biting, and your cousins would love it if you came." He looked at me again, then back at his cousins. I could see the internal struggle on his face. He was used to being the center of attention, the one who was invited to the special events. This time, he was just another person being asked to join. Finally, he sighed, a sound of resignation. "Okay, fine, I'll come." I felt a small wave of triumph. It was a victory, small as it was, and a sign that my plan, my honest, brutal approach, was starting to work. We drove to the lake in my old truck, the windows down, the wind whipping through our hair. The kids were in the back seat, chattering excitedly, their joy contagious. Liam was quiet, staring out the window, a somber presence in the otherwise happy atmosphere. When we got to the lake, I set up the fishing poles, baiting the hooks with worms. Liam stood back, his arms crossed, watching. He hadn't been fishing since he was a little boy. I could tell he didn't remember how to do it. "Here," I said, handing him a pole. "Just like we used to. Remember?" He took the pole, his grip a little awkward. He tried to cast, but the line got tangled, the hook flying back and nearly catching him in the ear. "Whoa," I said, my heart jumping into my throat. "Let me help you with that." I knelt beside him, my old knees protesting, and worked at the tangled line. My fingers, a little stiff with age, worked to untangle the mess. Liam watched, a flicker of something I couldn't quite place. Was it shame? Embarrassment? On his face. "Here," I said, "let's try that again. A little more of a smooth cast, less of a jerk." He nodded, and this time he got it right. The line flew out, landing with a soft plop in the middle of the lake. We sat there in a comfortable silence, the only sound the gentle lapping of the water against the boat. Leo and Mia were having a blast. Leo had already caught a small fish, and Mia was shrieking with delight as she watched him release it back into the water. "Grandpa, Grandpa, look!" she yelled, pointing at a dragonfly buzzing by. It was a simple, perfect moment, a moment of pure, unadulterated family. For the first time since this all began, I felt a sense of peace. And then I heard it. A quiet chuckle from Liam. He was watching Mia, a small smile playing on his lips. He saw her point at the dragonfly and then looked at me, a silent admission in his eyes. He remembered. He remembered the feeling of being a kid, of being fascinated by the smallest things. We didn't catch many fish that day, but that wasn't the point. The point was that we were together. We were talking, we were laughing, and we were, for a few short hours, a family again. It was a fragile piece, I knew. But it was a start. And in my heart I knew that the small tangled fishing line was just a metaphor for our family. It was a mess. But with patience and a little help, it could be untangled. When we got home, the sun was setting, painting the sky in a soft wash of pink and gold. Sarah was on the porch, a worried look on her face. She saw us get out of the truck, saw Liam with his fishing pole, a small, genuine smile on his face, and the surprise on her face was clear. "You guys went fishing?" she asked, her voice a little incredulous. "We did," I said, my voice calm and steady. "We had a good time." She looked at Liam, then at me, her expression unreadable. I knew what she was thinking. She was wondering what had happened. She was wondering why her golden boy was laughing with his cousins, why he was smiling, why he was, for the first time in a long time, just a kid. She was seeing something she hadn't seen in a long time. The family she had helped to break was, slowly but surely, starting to mend. And a small, hopeful part of me believed that she was just as ready to heal as the rest of us. The days that followed were a delicate dance. Sarah, while still maintaining a certain distance, seemed to be watching us, observing the change. The closed door of the guest room was now an open invitation, a silent acknowledgement that the Cold War was, for now, at a ceasefire. Liam, for his part, was different. He was no longer a silent presence. He came down for breakfast, he sat with us at dinner, and he even joined in on a few of our activities. One afternoon, I found him in the den, sitting on the floor, helping Leo and Mia with their Lego city. He was focused, his long fingers working with a precision I had never seen from him before. He was building a bridge, a complicated, multi-arch structure that connected one part of their city to another. "Grandpa," Leo said, his voice filled with admiration, "look at the bridge Liam built." I knelt down beside them, a genuine smile on my face. "That's incredible, son. That's a work of art." Liam looked up, a small, self-conscious smile on his face. "It's just Legos, Grandpa." "It's more than that," I said, my voice soft. "It's a bridge. It connects things. It connects people." He looked at me, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. He didn't say anything, but he didn't have to. The bridge, a simple structure of plastic bricks, was a silent metaphor for what was happening. He was building bridges, not just in their Lego city, but between himself and his cousins, between himself and his family. That evening, as we were all sitting around the dinner table, the atmosphere was lighter than it had been in years. There was laughter, there was conversation, there was a sense of ease that had been missing for so long. "Liam," Sarah said, her voice a little hesitant, "I'm so glad you're out of that room. It's nice to have you all together." Liam looked at her, then at me. "It's nice to be here, Mum," he said, and the words, so simple, so genuine, were the sweetest sound I had heard in a long time. After dinner, Sarah and I were doing the dishes together, the old-fashioned way. I washed, and she dried. The silence between us was no longer a sign of tension, but of a quiet peace. "Dad," she said, her voice low and hesitant, I'm sorry." I stopped washing a plate and looked at her. Her face was turned away, but I could see the shame and the regret in her eyes. "I'm sorry for how I acted," she continued, her voice a whisper. "I was so focused on Liam, on his future, on his success, that I forgot about everything else. I forgot about the others. I forgot about us." I put the plate down and took her hand in mine, my old fingers wrapping around her young, strong ones. "Sarah," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "I'm sorry too. I'm sorry that I let it get this far. I'm sorry that I didn't say something sooner. We all made a mistake." She finally looked at me, and I saw the tears welling up in her eyes. I wanted him to have the best. I wanted him to succeed. I wanted him to be everything I thought he could be. "And he can," I said, "but not at the expense of others. Not at the expense of his family. He can be a successful man, a good man, and still be a loving cousin, a caring nephew. The two don't have to be mutually exclusive." She nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "You were right, Dad. This house, this family, it's about everyone having a place, not just one person." We stood there for a long moment, a silent apology and a silent forgiveness passing between us. The air was no longer heavy with tension. It was filled with a sense of hope, a sense of healing. Later that night I went to my room, the house finally quiet. I sat on the edge of my bed, the old springs groaning in protest. I thought about the week we'd had, the conflict, the tension, the quiet moments of understanding, and the final, beautiful moment of reconciliation. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. Old habits were hard to break, but we had taken the first step. We had acknowledged the problem. We had started to build bridges. I looked at the window, the soft light of the moon illuminating the old oak tree. The tree, with its deep roots and sprawling branches, was like our family. We had been shaken by the storm, but our roots were strong, and with a little care, a little love, and a lot of honesty, we could weather any storm. I knew with a certainty that was both comforting and terrifying that the story of our family was not over. It was just beginning. The following morning, I woke to the sound of laughter. It wasn't the polite, strained laughter of before. This was a genuine, full-throated sound, the kind that came from the gut. I walked down the hallway, the old wood floorboards groaning under my feet, and found the source. In the living room, a chaotic tangle of blankets, pillows, and sleeping bags was now a fort. A sprawling, magnificent fort made of cushions, chairs, and every blanket in the house. Liam was inside the fort, his head poking out from an opening, a goofy grin on his face. Leo and Mia were giggling as they brought him more pillows. Sarah was standing in the doorway, a mug of coffee in her hand, watching the scene with a soft smile. "Good morning, Grandpa," Mia said, her voice muffled from inside the fort. "Liam helped us build it. It's our fortress of solitude." "More like a fortress of chaos," Liam joked, his voice full of warmth. I looked at Sarah, and she looked at me. There was a silent understanding between us. This was it. This was the change. This wasn't a truce. It was a genuine reconciliation. The golden boy was gone. In his place was a big brother, a cousin, a part of the family, and that was more precious than any title we had ever given him. The day was spent in a blur of activity. We went for a hike in the woods behind the house, the sun filtering through the canopy of leaves, dappling the ground in light and shadow. We pointed out different birds and animals to the kids. Liam, who had always seemed to be in a world of his own, was now an active participant, pointing out a hawk circling overhead and identifying a type of tree with surprising accuracy. "You know your trees, huh?" I asked, a little surprised. "Yeah," he said a little shyly. "I took a class in college. It's interesting." It was a small thing, a simple piece of information, but it was a window into his world, a world we had been so intent on making perfect that we had forgotten to get to know it. Later that afternoon, Mark and his wife Lisa arrived. They had been kept in the loop through phone calls, but they hadn't seen the change firsthand. As soon as they walked in, they noticed the difference. The house, which had been so heavy with tension just a few days ago, now felt light and airy. "What's going on?" Lisa whispered to me. her eyes wide with surprise as she watched Liam, Leo, and Mia huddled together on the floor, drawing. "A miracle, I think," I whispered back, a smile tugging at my lips. That evening, we all sat around the dinner table, a full house, a complete family. There were no silent moments, no hushed whispers. There was only the clatter of silverware, the murmur of conversation, and the bright, clear sound of laughter. Liam was telling a story about a professor he had in college, a strange, quirky man who had a penchant for wearing mismatched socks. He was a natural storyteller, and everyone was captivated. Sarah, watching him, had a look of pure, unadulterated pride on her face, but it was different this time. It wasn't the kind of pride that put him above others. It was the kind of pride that celebrated him for who he was, for the person he was becoming. After dinner, as the kids were getting ready for bed, I went into the den. The fort was still there, a monument to their newfound bond. I walked over to it, my old heart full of love and a sense of profound relief. I saw Liam tucking a pillow under Mia's head. "There you go, little one," he said, his voice soft. "Sleep tight." Mia looked up at him, her eyes heavy with sleep. "Good night, Liam," she mumbled. "I'm glad you're here." Liam just smiled, a gentle, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Me too, Mia, me too." I turned and walked away, a tear of gratitude escaping my eye. The battle for the guest room had been a symbol, a wake-up call. It had been a painful, difficult confrontation, but it had forced us to look at ourselves, to see the cracks in our foundation, and to start the long, difficult process of rebuilding. As I climbed the stairs to my own room, I thought of my wife, Eleanor. I knew she would be smiling. She had always believed in us, even when we had lost our way. She had always known that love and family were the only things that truly mattered. And tonight, with a house full of love, a house no longer divided, I knew she was right. The quiet night, the gentle hum of the refrigerator, the faint sounds of the kids settling down for the night, all of it was a symphony of peace. The storm had passed, leaving behind a clear sky, a fresh start. And I, the old man in the rocking chair, was ready to face whatever came next, because I knew that as long as we had each other, we would be all right. The days blurred into a comfortable rhythm. The initial tension had fully dissolved, replaced by a casual, easy camaraderie that felt more like a family than anything we'd had in years. The living room, once a battleground of sleeping bags and silent judgment, was now the hub of activity. Mornings began with the kids' energetic chatter, and evenings ended with shared stories and quiet conversation. Liam was a different person. He spent less time in his room and more time with us. He taught Leo how to play a new card game, and he helped Mia with a puzzle that had frustrated her for days. He was no longer the detached, entitled young man. He was a gentle and patient older cousin, and the shift was a joy to witness. One afternoon I found him on the porch, sitting in my old rocking chair, a book in his hand. He looked up as I approached, a peaceful expression on his face. "Mind if I join you?" I asked. "Not at all, Grandpa," he said, patting the seat next to him. "It's a good chair." I sat down, the old wood groaning in agreement. "It's my thinking chair," I said. "A lot of hard decisions have been made on this porch." He just nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. After a long moment of silence, he spoke, his voice low and thoughtful. "I've been thinking about what you said, Grandpa." I looked at him, my heart in my throat. I had thought my words had just been a catalyst, a moment to push the family in the right direction. I didn't realize they had resonated so deeply with him. "About the golden boy thing," he continued, still not looking at me. I think I've always known it, deep down. I just never admitted it to myself. I always felt like I had to be the best, the smartest, the most successful. It was exhausting. My heart ached for him. "I'm so sorry, son," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "We put that on you. We did that. We never meant to, but we did." He finally looked at me, his eyes clear and honest. "I know," he said, "and I'm sorry too. I'm sorry for being a jerk. I'm sorry for how I acted, for how I treated Leo and Mia. I was so wrapped up in my own head, in my own sense of entitlement, I guess, that I didn't see what was right in front of me." "It's okay, son," I said, putting a hand on his shoulder. "It's okay to admit you're wrong. That's what being a man is all about. It's about being strong enough to be vulnerable. It's about being brave enough to apologize." He just nodded, a weight seeming to lift from his shoulders. We sat there in a comfortable silence, 2 generations of men, a new understanding passing between us. He wasn't the golden boy anymore. He was just Liam, a young man finding his way, and I was just Arthur, an old man who had finally found the courage to fix his own mistakes. That evening, the whole family went to the old drive-in movie theater. We piled into my old truck, blankets and pillows in the back. The kids were a bundle of excited energy, their laughter filling the small cab. We watched a classic comedy, the tinny sound from the old speaker adding to the nostalgic charm. In the back, Liam, Leo and Mia were huddled together under a big blanket, sharing a tub of popcorn. I looked back at them, my heart swelling with a kind of joy I hadn't felt in a long time. This was what it was all about. This was the family my wife had dreamed of. This was the house full of love and laughter she had always wanted. As the credits rolled and the stars came out, I looked at Sarah, who was sitting next to me. She was watching her son, her face a mixture of relief and love. "Dad," she said, her voice soft. "Thank you." "For what?" I asked, though I knew. "For everything," she said, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "For not letting me get away with it. For fighting for us. For fighting for him." I just smiled, a simple old man's smile, and squeezed her hand. I hadn't fought for them. I had fought for us. And in doing so, I had found a piece of myself, a piece of my family, that I had thought was lost forever. The end of the week arrived, and with it, the quiet sadness that comes with goodbyes. The house was a flurry of activity, as suitcases were packed and car keys were located. The unspoken tension of a few days ago was gone, replaced by a feeling of shared warmth and lingering affection. I was in the kitchen, making one last pot of coffee when Sarah came in. She had her handbag slung over her shoulder, a gentle smile on her face. "Dad," she said, "we're ready to go." I turned, and in that moment I saw not the successful lawyer or the frustrated mother from a few days ago, but my daughter, my little girl with her bright eyes and her stubborn streak. "Are you sure you have everything?" I asked, a familiar paternal question. She nodded, then walked over and gave me a long, tight hug. "I love you, Dad," she whispered in my ear. "I love you too, honey," I said, holding her close, a feeling of deep peace settling over me. We had come full circle, from a place of conflict to a place of understanding, and the journey had been worth every painful step. When we walked outside, Liam was standing by the car, helping Leo and Mia with their luggage. They were saying goodbye, and I watched as Liam knelt down and gave each of them a big hug. "I'll see you guys soon, okay?" he said, his voice full of genuine affection. "And next time, we'll build a fortress so big, it'll take up the whole living room." Mia's face lit up. "Promise?" "I promise," he said, a small, genuine smile on his face. He stood up and walked over to me. He held out his hand, and I took it, my old hand dwarfed by his young, strong one. "Grandpa," he said, his voice a little formal, "thank you for everything. For the talk, for the fishing trip, for the fort. Thank you for showing me what a family really is." I didn't say anything. I just pulled him into a hug, a real, honest-to-goodness hug. It was the first time we had ever truly hugged, not as a polite formality, but as an act of genuine connection. He was my grandson, and in that moment, I was so proud of the man he was becoming. After they drove away, the house felt quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. It was no longer a lonely silence, but a peaceful one, a silence filled with the echoes of laughter and the lingering warmth of a family united. Mark and Lisa were still there. We went back inside and sat on the porch, the same porch where I had sat just a few days ago, my heart heavy with sadness. "I've never seen Sarah like that before," Mark said, his voice filled with wonder. "She was so at peace." "We all were," I said, taking a slow sip of my iced tea. "You know," he continued, "for a minute there, I thought you were crazy, giving them that ultimatum. I thought you were just going to cause a bigger fight." "Sometimes," I said, looking out at the sun setting, the same sun that had set so angrily just a few nights ago, "you have to tear something down to rebuild it stronger. You have to risk losing everything to gain everything." He nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I think you were right about a lot of things, Dad. About how we've treated Liam, about how we've let things go on for too long. We're a family, son," I said, a deep sense of contentment in my voice. "We're all we have, and we're a lot stronger when we're honest with each other, when we're willing to admit when we're wrong, when we're willing to fight for each other." That night, as I lay in my bed, the familiar sounds of the house a comforting melody, I felt a deep sense of peace. The battle for the guest room had been won, not by a single person, but by all of us, together. We had faced a difficult truth, and in doing so we had rediscovered the love and respect that had always been at the heart of our family. I closed my eyes and smiled. The house was quiet, but it was no longer empty. It was full of memories, full of love, and full of the promise of a future where every single person had a place, where every single person was a golden child, a treasured part of a family that was, at long last, truly whole. The weeks that followed settled into a quiet normalcy. The house felt lighter, the atmosphere warmer. The phone calls from Sarah and Mark were no longer just check-ins. They were filled with stories and laughter. We talked about everything, from the mundane details of their lives to the bigger things, the things that truly mattered. I found myself thinking about the past, about my wife, Eleanor, and the legacy she had left behind. She had always been the heart of our family, the one who kept us together, who smoothed over the rough edges. I had been the steady hand, the provider, but she had been the soul, and in her absence, I had let that soul fade, let the small cracks in our family grow into deep fissures. I realized with a clarity that was both painful and freeing that the fight over the guest room wasn't just about a room, it was about my failure. My failure to see the damage that was being done, my failure to step in and fix it sooner. It was about my complacency, my quiet acceptance of a dynamic that was slowly poisoning our family. I decided to do something about it. I called Mark and Sarah and asked them to come over for dinner. No kids, just the three of us. When they arrived, I had a pot roast in the oven, a classic, comforting dish that Eleanor used to make. We sat around the kitchen table, the air filled with the delicious aroma of roasted meat and vegetables. "Dad," Sarah said, her voice a little hesitant, "is everything okay? You sounded so serious on the phone." "Everything is more than okay," I said, a small smile on my face. I wanted to talk to you both about us." They looked at each other, then back at me, a sense of shared apprehension on their faces. "I need to apologize," I said, and the words once so difficult to say now came easily. "I need to apologize for my part in all of this, for the way things were. I let it happen. I let the favoritism, the unequal treatment go on for too long. I should have said something sooner. I should have fought for all of you, not just for the ideal of a perfect family." There was a long silence. Sarah's eyes were filled with tears, and Mark just looked at me, a thoughtful, quiet expression on his face. "Dad," Mark finally said, "you don't have to apologize. We all had a hand in it. We all let it happen." "Maybe so," I said, "but I was the head of this family. I was the one who was supposed to be the rock, and I let you all down. I'm so sorry." Sarah reached across the table and took my hand. "Dad, stop. You didn't let us down. You did the opposite. You were the one who had the courage to say what needed to be said. You were the one who fixed it." "She's right, Dad," Mark added. "You were the one who held up a mirror to us, who showed us what we were doing. You were the one who brought us back together." We sat there for a long time, the pot roast growing cold, but our hearts were full. We talked about our memories, about Eleanor, about the good times and the bad. We laughed, we cried, and we finally, truly, healed. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a sense of peace that was deeper and more profound than anything I had ever known. The weight I had carried for so long, the burden of my own mistakes, was finally gone. I had said the words that needed to be said, and in doing so I had not only repaired my family, but I had repaired myself. The house was quiet, but it was no longer lonely. It was filled with the echoes of a shared history and the promise of a brighter future. I knew that the road ahead would still have its challenges, its bumps and its twists, but I also knew that we would face them together, because we were a family, and a family, I had learned, was not about perfection. It was about love and forgiveness and the courage to admit when you're wrong. The following weeks were a testament to the power of open communication and forgiveness. Our family, once a fragile collection of individuals, now felt like a unified whole. Sarah and Mark had regular family dinners at my house, and the laughter of the grandkids filled the halls, a joyful noise that was once so rare. I found a renewed purpose in my life. I was no longer just the old man on the porch. I was the patriarch, the one who held the family together, the one who had learned from his mistakes and was now using that wisdom to guide us forward. One sunny afternoon, I was in the yard, tending to the rose bushes that Eleanor had so loved. I was humming a tune, a happy one, when I heard my name. Grandpa! I turned and saw Liam standing there, a backpack slung over his shoulder. He looked different. His hair was a little longer, his face a little more mature. He looked like a man who had found his place in the world. Liam, I said, a smile spreading across my face. What are you doing here? I thought you were back at college. I was, he said, a shy smile on his face. But I wanted to come home, just for a quick visit. I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about. He looked around the yard, his eyes lingering on the rose bushes, on the old porch, on the house that had been the site of so much conflict and so much healing. I wanted to tell you something, he said, his voice low and serious. I'm changing my major. The news surprised me. Oh? What to? Forestry, he said, a sense of quiet pride in his voice. I want to work with trees. I want to work in the woods. I want to build things, like we did with the Legos and like we did with our family. The words hit me with the force of a tidal wave. I stood there, a little stunned, a feeling of immense pride and gratitude welling up inside me. The young man who had been so focused on success, on achievement, on being the golden boy, had found a new path, a path that was not about a title or an accomplishment, but about connection, about building, about the simple, honest beauty of the natural world. I put down my gardening gloves and walked over to him. I put my hand on his shoulder, a silent gesture of love and support. That's a wonderful thing, son, I said, my voice thick with emotion. That's a beautiful thing. He just nodded, a tear tracing a path down his cheek. I wanted you to be the first to know, he said, his voice a little choked up. You helped me see. You helped me see what's really important. We stood there for a long moment, the sun warm on our faces, the gentle breeze rustling the leaves on the old oak tree. The battle for the guest room had been a catalyst. It had been the event that had forced us to confront our demons, to face our mistakes, and to find our way back to each other. But it had also been more than that. It had been the thing that had changed a boy into a man who was no longer just looking out for himself, but for the world around him. A man who understood that true value was not in what you owned, but in what you built. And in that moment I knew that Eleanor, wherever she was smiling. She had always believed in the power of love, of family, and of the human heart to find its way back home. The rest of Liam's visit was a quiet celebration. We didn't throw a party or make a big fuss. The celebration was in the small moments, the shared cup of coffee in the morning, the long talks on the porch, the laughter that filled the kitchen as we cooked together. Liam wasn't a guest anymore. He was a part of the house, a piece of the puzzle that had finally found its place. One evening, after the kids were in bed, Sarah, Mark and I sat around the fire pit in the backyard. The flames danced in the dark, casting long, shifting shadows on our faces. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. I can't believe it, Sarah said, her voice filled with a mixture of wonder and disbelief. He's changing his major. He's so happy. I haven't seen him this happy in years. He's found his purpose, I said, looking into the dancing flames. He's found something that truly resonates with him, not something he thinks he has to do to impress us, or to be what we think he should be. I think he's right, Mark said, his voice thoughtful. He's always been good with his hands. He's always loved being outside. We were so focused on what was supposed to be the right path, the perfect path, that we didn't see the one that was right in front of us. We were all so focused on the destination that we forgot to enjoy the journey, I said, and a wave of sadness washed over me. I thought of all the years we had wasted, the years of unspoken tension, of quiet resentments. But the sadness was quickly replaced by a profound sense of gratitude. We had found our way back. It had been a long and difficult journey, but we had made it. I keep thinking about the day we all came here, Sarah said, her voice low. I was so angry. I was so sure I was right. I was so convinced that Liam deserved special treatment. I was so blind. We all were, honey, I said, reaching over and taking her hand. But you had the courage to see. You had the courage to change. She just shook her head, a small smile on her face. No, Dad. You had the courage. You were the one who risked everything to show us the way. We sat in silence for a long time, the fire crackling, the stars twinkling in the inky sky. The silence was no longer a sign of a family divided, but a sign of a family at peace. We had been through a fire, a difficult, painful conflagration of old hurts and unspoken truths, and we had come out on the other side, stronger, more resilient, and more in love than ever before. As the fire began to die down, the embers glowing a soft red, I stood up and stretched, my old bones protesting. "Well," I said, my voice a little tired but full of contentment, "it's been a good week. A very good week. The best," Liam said, his voice a low rumble. "Thank you, Grandpa, for everything." I just nodded, a silent acknowledgement of his gratitude and my own. I looked at the three of them, my children, my grandson, a feeling of pure, unadulterated love filling my chest. The house, the land, the guest room, none of it mattered. What mattered was us, the family, the beautiful, imperfect and resilient unit that we were. And as I walked back to the house, I knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, a new story, one that was not about conflict, but about love and forgiveness, and the quiet, simple joy of being together. The quiet of the house returned after Liam's departure, but it was a different kind of quiet. It was a silence filled with a sense of peace, of a job well done. The phone calls from Liam were frequent, filled with stories about his new classes, his new friends, and his growing passion for forestry. He was a different person, a different man, and I knew that the battle over the guest room had been the beginning of his journey, not just for him, but for all of us. One afternoon, a few weeks later, I was cleaning out the attic. It was a dusty, forgotten place, filled with the relics of a life lived. I found old photo albums, my wife's college books, and a small wooden box. I opened it, and inside, nestled on a bed of old tissue paper, was the most beautiful quilt I had ever seen. It was the quilt my wife, Eleanor, had made for the guest room. I had forgotten about it. I had forgotten the countless hours she had spent, her fingers moving with a quiet, patient grace as she sewed each square together, a labor of love for a future she had so desperately wanted to see. The quilt was a patchwork of different colors and different fabrics, a symbol of our family, a collection of different people coming together to create something beautiful and whole. I carried the quilt downstairs, the soft fabric cool against my skin. I laid it out on the living room floor and I sat there, a cup of coffee in my hand, just staring at it. I saw the different squares, the different colors, the different patterns, and I saw my family. I saw the stubbornness of Sarah, the quiet strength of Mark, the innocence of Leo and Mia, the ambition of Liam. I saw all the different parts of us, all the different pieces of our lives, and I saw how they were all woven together by my wife's love, by her hope, by her quiet, unwavering belief in the power of family. A tear escaped my eye and traced a path down my cheek. I hadn't just fought for a room. I had fought for this. I had fought for the legacy of love and hope that my wife had left behind. I had fought to keep her dream alive, and I had succeeded. I decided to do something special. I called Sarah and Mark and told them to bring the kids over for a surprise. When they arrived, I led them into the living room, and their faces were a study in wonder as they saw the quilt laid out on the floor like a masterpiece. "Dad," Sarah said, her voice a whisper, "the quilt. I haven't seen this in years." "Your mother made it," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "She made it for all of you, for all of her grandchildren. She wanted this to be a place of love, a place of welcome. She wanted this to be a home for everyone." The kids, wide-eyed, walked over to the quilt and knelt down, their small fingers tracing the patterns. "It's beautiful, Grandpa," Mia said, her voice filled with awe. "It is," I said, a deep sense of peace in my heart. "And now, we're going to put it where it belongs, in the guest room." We all walked into the guest room, and together we unfolded the quilt and laid it on the bed. It fit perfectly. The room, which had been the site of so much conflict, was now transformed into a sanctuary of love, a symbol of a family reunited. Sarah and Mark stood there, their eyes filled with tears, and I knew that they too understood the significance of this moment. The room was no longer just a room. It was a symbol of our healing, a monument to our love, and a testament to the power of a family that had found its way back to each other. As I left the room, the scent of old wood and the fresh scent of the laundered quilt filling the air, I felt a sense of profound contentment. The battle had been won. The house was no longer divided. It was, at long last, a home. The summer came and went, a blur of long days and warm nights. The house was a constant hub of activity, a revolving door of family. The kids would come and go, bringing with them a joyful chaos that I had once dreaded, but now embraced with a full heart. The guest room, with its beautiful quilt, was a silent witness to it all. It housed cousins, friends, and family, always with a sense of quiet welcome. One crisp autumn morning, the kind that makes you want to pull on a sweater and go for a long walk, I was on the porch, a cup of hot coffee in my hand, watching the leaves fall. The air was cool and smelled of wood smoke and crisp fallen leaves. A car pulled into the driveway, and I saw Liam get out, a wide smile on his face. "Grandpa," he said, his voice full of warmth. "Liam, what a surprise," I said, a genuine smile on my face. "Come on up. I've got a fresh pot of coffee on." He came up the stairs and we sat on the porch, the same porch where I had sat just months ago, a lonely old man with a heavy heart. Now I sat here, a happy man, a grateful man, with a grandson who was no longer just a boy, but a friend. "I have something for you," he said, and he reached into his backpack and pulled out a small, beautifully carved wooden bird. It was a replica of a blue jay, its feathers detailed with a delicate precision that made it look almost alive. I took the bird in my hand, the cool, smooth wood feeling heavy and solid. "Liam," I said, my voice filled with awe, This is incredible. You made this?" He nodded, a shy smile on his face. "Yeah, it's a new hobby. I'm taking a woodworking class in college. I thought of you. I thought of how you always told me to build things." I looked at the bird in my hand and I felt a tear escape my eye. This wasn't just a gift. It was a symbol. It was a testament to the boy he had been and the man he was becoming. It was a sign that the seeds we had planted, the conversations we had, the difficult truths we had faced, had taken root and were now blooming into something beautiful. "Thank you, son," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever owned." He just smiled, a look of pure, unadulterated contentment on his face. We sat there in a comfortable silence, two men, two generations, connected by a shared history, a shared love, and a small carved wooden bird. Later that day, we went for a long walk in the woods behind the house. The leaves crunched under our feet, a symphony of autumn. We talked about everything. We talked about his classes, about my life, about his future. He told me about his new friends, about the projects he was working on, about the quiet joy he found in working with his hands, in creating something beautiful out of something simple. He was no longer the boy who had been so focused on success, on a title, on a legacy. He was a man who was focused on the simple, honest beauty of life. He was a man who understood that true value was not in what you accumulated, but in what you created. And in that moment, as I walked beside him, a deep sense of pride filling my chest, I knew that the battle for the guest room had been a fight worth fighting. It had been a wake-up call, a painful, difficult confrontation that had forced us to look at ourselves, to see the cracks in our foundation, and to start the long, difficult process of rebuilding. And now we stood in the quiet beauty of the woods, two men, a family, a testament to the power of love, forgiveness, and the human heart to find its way back home. The years that followed were a testament to the power of family and forgiveness. The guest room, once a symbol of division, became a place of connection, a sanctuary for every member of our growing family. The quilt, with its rich tapestry of colors and fabrics, became a silent witness to a new generation of memories being made. My grandson, Liam, graduated from college not with a law degree but with a degree in forestry. He started a small business, a woodworking shop in a quiet town, where he made beautiful, handcrafted furniture. His work was a testament to his character, solid, beautiful, and built to last. He had found his calling, a path that was not about money or prestige, but about passion, purpose, and a deep connection to the natural world. The old house, my house, became a gathering place, a constant hub of activity. The smell of fresh coffee and home-cooked meals was a constant presence. The sound of children's laughter, once so rare, was now a daily soundtrack. The old porch, my thinking chair, became a place for shared stories, for quiet conversations, for the simple, peaceful moments that make up a life. My daughter, Sarah, and my son, Mark, grew closer than ever before. The old rivalries, the unspoken resentments, had long since faded, replaced by a deep and abiding respect for each other. They had learned, as I had, that a family was not about perfection. It was about acceptance, about forgiveness, about showing up for each other, especially when it was hard. One quiet evening, as the sun was setting, casting a golden glow on the old house, I was on the porch, my old rocking chair creaking a familiar tune. I was no longer a lonely old man. I was a patriarch, a grandfather, a father, a man who had lived a full life, a man who had made mistakes, and a man who had, at long last, found peace. I watched as my grandchildren, now young adults, played a game of cornhole on the lawn. They were laughing, their voices a joyful symphony in the quiet evening. I saw Liam, with his broad shoulders and his kind eyes, coaching Leo on his throw. I saw Mia, a beautiful young woman with her mother's fierce spirit, cheering them on. They were a family, a real family, a family that was not divided by unspoken resentments or old hurts, but a family that was united by love, by shared history, and by a deep and abiding connection to each other. A memory came to me, a memory of a time not so long ago, when this house was filled with tension, with unspoken anger, with a quiet sadness that had threatened to consume us all. I thought of the battle for the guest room, the ultimatum I had given, the difficult conversations that had followed. I thought of the risk I had taken, the chance I had taken to lose everything, to gain everything. And in that moment, I knew that it had been the right decision. I looked at the house, at the front door, the very door that had been the site of so many difficult goodbyes and so many joyful hellos. I knew that it wasn't just a house. It was a home. It was a testament to the power of a family that had faced its demons, that had healed its wounds, and that had, at long last, found its way back to each other. The sun finally dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in a final fiery wash of orange and purple. The air grew cooler, and a single timid star winked into existence. I closed my eyes, and a deep sense of peace settled over me. I was home. My family was home. And that, I knew, was a happy ending, more beautiful than any I could have ever imagined. The years turned into a gentle tide, carrying me forward into the peaceful harbor of my old age. The house stood strong against the seasons, its walls a silent witness to the ebb and flow of our family's life. The guest room, once the symbolic heart of our division, was now the room of 1,000 stories. It welcomed newlyweds, a new baby, and friends from far away, each person a new thread in the beautiful quilt of our life. The old quilt, now a cherished heirloom, was a reminder of what we had overcome and a testament to the love that held us all together. My wife's legacy, the one I had feared was lost, was not just in a quilt or a house. It was in the way my children and grandchildren spoke to each other, with a kindness and an honesty that had been absent for so long. It was in the easy laughter and the quiet moments of support. It was in the way Liam, now a man in his own right, would stop by just to sit on the porch with me, not for a reason, but just to be together. One quiet afternoon, I was sitting on my porch, my old bones a little weary, but my heart full. Liam was next to me, just returned from a trip to the mountains. The sun was warm on our faces, the air filled with the scent of freshly mown grass. "Grandpa," he said, his voice thoughtful, "remember that first week I came here, when everything was a mess?" I smiled, a soft, sad smile. How could I forget? I was so angry, he confessed, so full of myself. I thought I deserved everything. I thought I was better than everyone else. And you didn't let me get away with it. You fought for them, you fought for all of us. "I fought for what was right, son," I said, a deep sense of peace in my voice. "It wasn't easy, but it was the only thing to do." He nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "I never told you this, but that night after you told me I was acting like a jerk, I cried. I was so angry at you, but I was even more angry at myself, because I knew you were right. I knew I had become someone I didn't want to be. You made me look at myself, Grandpa. You held up a mirror and I saw a reflection I didn't like. You saved me." The words hit me like a physical blow, a wave of emotion so profound it took my breath away. I hadn't realized the impact, the true depth of the change. I hadn't just fixed a family problem, I had helped a young man find his way. I put my hand on his shoulder, my old wrinkled fingers resting on his strong young ones. "You saved yourself, son," I said, my voice thick with emotion. I just showed you the way. The rest was all you." He just smiled, a tear tracing a path down his cheek, and in that moment, a beautiful, perfect moment in time, I knew that my journey was complete. I was an old man, my life was nearing its end, but I had lived it well. I had loved a good woman, I had raised good children, and I had at long last healed a family that had been broken. The sun began to set, the sky a fiery wash of orange and red, the same sun that had set so angrily on the night of our first conflict. Now it was a gentle, beautiful ending to a beautiful, long day. I leaned back in my chair, a feeling of deep peace settling over me. The house was quiet, but it was not empty. It was full of love, full of forgiveness, full of the echoes of a life well lived, and I knew with a certainty that was both comforting and terrifying that I was a happy man, and in the end, that was all that truly mattered.